You're listening to the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Look, it's a new theme, and I was able to debut it for Volume 10. And tonight I get the chance to debut it for Volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Welcome, everyone, to episode 167 of the Mike the New Haven podcast. As I mentioned last episode, we are on the mad dash to the milestone episode 200, which I should hit at this rate in sometime in the summer. If you haven't checked out 166, that was great. Another mini series, The Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's Elite, Volume 15. Kevin Kubler from the Special Operations Command of the FDNY. Great guy, great interview, great friend of mine. He was in Squad 288 of the FDNY, which is located out in the Maspeth section of Queens. So, like I said, two mini-series this week. We started off with The Best of the Bravest, and we covered firemen. Back now to the Emergency Service Unit tonight with my next guest, who saw his fair share in 20 years as a police officer and later detective specialist in not one, but two different police departments, originally a member of the New York City Housing Police. He came on in the fall of 1990 and was one of the original 44 housing cops assigned to their version of the Emergency Service Unit, the Emergency Rescue Unit, or ERU, in the summer of 1992. Absorbed and eventually assigned into the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, he stayed alive in Truck 5 for a while before a 1999 transfer brought him to Truck 3 in the South Bronx. Specializing in and responding to a wide array of emergencies, the experiences were many, and for Volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, we'll be hearing them tonight with John Latanzio. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Mike. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the invite, and hope we can tell some good stories today.
I think we will, and it's funny because usually this is always a shocker to me when this happens. It's usually me chasing guys down to get them to come on the show, but it was a pleasant surprise to give the audience a little inside baseball. After I had the great pleasure of interviewing our mutual friend Rick Martinez, I got a lovely email from you, and you were giving me your career in that email, and I said, of course I need to get this guy on the show, and I called you the next day, and here we are having having this conversation this evening.
Yeah, yes, you did. That's exactly how it happened. Correct.
So I'm glad that you're here. The first question, because you know the show, you follow it. Where'd you grow up?
I am born and raised in Staten Island, New York. Now I'm retired down in Florida, but I do do the back and forth snowbird thing. I was in the North Shore of Staten Island. I was raised in the West Brighton, Fort Richmond area. Grew up in the 70s on a little street called Greenleaf Avenue. My home was about 3 doors down from Public School 19. And so it was a good time growing up as kids and everything like that. We had a little brook that ran down our backyard. We had a little ramp. We'd ride bicycles and jump it like Evel Knievel and stuff like that, and wiffle ball bats and everything like that. The schoolyard was right there, so we were always playing. Good bunch of kids. Childhood memories were very fond, and when the street light came on, you went home. So that was the rule. Yeah, my dad was a U.S. Postal Service guy growing up, and my mom worked in the field of home care attendant at a nursing home.
So it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you, was your neighborhood a civil service neighborhood? Were there a lot of guys on the job in the FD and the PD?
Believe it or not, it was a mix of everything in that neighborhood. And it's funny you mentioned it. In the 70s, the family of Rocco Laurie was in my neighborhood. And when that tragedy happened in the 9th, where the 2 officers, Foster and Laurie, were killed, the church was literally 2 blocks north of me, and my dad, took me up there to see that funeral. It was cold, snowy and everything, it had snowed and everything like that, and very chilly February. I think they were killed on January 27th down the Lower East Side, and it was Sacred Heart Church up on Forest Avenue and Manor Road, which was literally like 2 blocks from my house and everything like that. But
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. My apologies.
No, so like that, the neighborhood, I think it was a mix of everybody. It wasn't just law enforcement. It wasn't, I think it was a lot of blue collar and white collar workers and everything like that. I literally had a laundromat that it was a very large laundromat that was across the street from my home. So, we used to see all the the trucks coming in and out, dropping off the linens and stuff like that being cleaned at the laundromat.
Was it that just even though it was a tragic circumstance, was it the display of brotherhood at that funeral that served as an impetus for you to want to go into civil service yourself?
It was still, I was only like 7 or 8 when I was just about 8 years old, and it still didn't actually hit me like what was actually happening. And my dad was explaining it in the most simplest form to me, that he was a Vietnam War veteran. He had come home, he had survived the war, and just to be killed in a horrific ambush in the Lower East Side of Manhattan was pretty shocking for me to like comprehend what was going on. And but the whole neighborhood came out in respect for this man and everything like that. you know I my mom was like, oh, his mother worked for the telephone company. She was like a Ma Bell um, telephone operator back in the day, and the father was a school teacher. And then they eventually named a school in Staten Island after Rocco Laurie, IS 72. I don't know if it means anything, but IS Intermediate School. His dad was a science teacher, from what I understand, and then they named the school 72, maybe the year that he was killed. I don't know if there's any significant connection with the number or anything like that. So
It could be. John Latanzio is our guest tonight. This is volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. If you're tuning in via LinkedIn or YouTube and you have a question for John that you want me to get to, submit it in the chat, and I promise at the proper time, I'll get to it. So coming on into the academy, you took the same test. Everybody took the same test during this time, but it was essentially a lottery. You didn't know if you were going to get the city PD, if you were going to get transit, or if you were going to get housing. And I always ask this, and I know the question seems redundant, but each perspective is different, which is why I don't think the question will ever get redundant. When you were taking the test and you passed, and then you passed the physical portion too, when you went through the 6 months, by the end of it, did you care which of the three you went to, or were you just happy to be a cop?
so it, I I really didn't want to be a cop in the beginning, to be honest with you, because I was already an EMT, and and I fell in love with that work and everything like that. But my grandmother had made me sign up for all these tests, so I was taking all of them. I took every single agency, and then there was a hiring freeze, so I got a little discouraged for a while because I was on hold for a long time, and I was like, it's never going to come through and everything like that. And then I get the phone call, and the investigator's like, "You still interested?" And something in the back of my head just said, "Sure, yeah, absolutely," because I could always make up my mind later on if this was not for me or not. But as far as which department, obviously everybody wanted to be NYPD, so I was aiming for that, I was hoping for that, but it did not happen that way. So I go down to Brooklyn College, like I'm instructed to. I'm all, suit and tie, this, that, and the other thing. And I get there as early as possible, and there's already like 400 or 500 people wrapped around this building. It's the second largest class in department history. It's. I was like, this can't be happening. Like there can't be 2,000 plus people trying to get the same job that I'm going for. So fate has it, yeah. I think they took 2,500 of us, and they swore us in the auditorium of Brooklyn College. So next thing you know, they're like, all right, we're gonna call you out in groups of 10. They brought us out into the hallway, and they were going, transit, housing, U5, NYPD, next 10. And that's how they picked. And I was number 5. I was the last one on the housing. So not that I drew the short end of the stick, because housing wound up being the best kept secret. I loved housing, and it was definitely, I think, one of the best places to learn the job for me.
Right. No, absolutely. And, it's funny that you told me that off the air, and we'll dive into it as we go. But the one thing I want to backtrack to is that you mentioned being an EMS. Now, back then, of course, New York City had its own ambulance corps for hospitals. In addition to that, it had the New York City EMS corps, which was citywide, which, as you may know, was merged into the FDNY in 1996. Given what you would later do in ESU, which we'll touch on momentarily, how well do you feel being an EMT and seeing people at their worst, unfortunately, equipped you for police work?
It was definitely so. I I take the test and I become an EMT, and and because I think I have a license, I'm qualified, and I'm furthest from the truth. So, you know, I'm applying for hospitals and this and that, and nobody wants to hire me because I don't have the experience and everything like that. So I wind up joining a volunteer organization in Staten Island called North Shore Rescue Squad. And a friend of mine had said, "Hey, if you want to see it, this is where you're going to see the action and everything like that." And we would go down to I joined the North Shore Rescue Squad, and we get on the ambulance, and then we go down to the 120th precinct, and we'd sign out a portable radio, and we'd buff jobs, and we'd hear calls, and as long as they were within short distance of where we were, we would respond to them. So, and like my first day, I got to set up, not set, but I mean, stabilize a fractured leg, pedestrian struck. And I think we even had a cardiac that night, where CPR was being performed and everything like that. And I was like, wow, this is like almost my instant, you know, into it. Like the eye opener, the shocker, all the adrenaline stuff that was racing through me and everything. So being the EMT prepared me for what I was going to see later on more with the NYPD.
Right, definitely. And you sent me a series of great photos that I will try to show as many of
Sure.
throughout. And one of them, to your point about that academy class, is this one, the cover of the Daily News. We're 2,181 cops safer, one of the largest rookie
Incredible.
classes since the streets. You don't
Yeah.
see classes like that anymore.
Yeah, we I think they swore in 2,500, and then over the course of 6 months they weeded out the ones. My company, we lost two, one academically and one to adult tests. Somebody popped for drugs in my company.
Mm, mm.
So
So, getting on to housing, let's dive into it. The best kept secret. So
yeah,
many people, transit, the merger happens, and I've had this conversation with some of the transit guys, and they miss it, but they were glad that they got to the PD because they got to go above ground for as much as they enjoyed it. Housing, though, you guys took it especially hard when the merge happens. And, I've talked with a few of the people on the air and off the air about that because of what you said, it being the best kept secret. Why exactly is that?
there. Well, one smaller department, so like you learn to work with these people tight. It was a tightly knit small group of officers. I was in PSA 4, which is Public Service Area number 4 down in the Lower East Side, and the command was off of Jackson and Madison, and at the minute I got to the command, I was we were accepted, immediately, because like the guys that were the junior now became the middle, and then the middle became the senior. So like everybody
Right.
was happy that the fresh faces were coming in and seniority was running up and so on and so forth. So I think that was really the best part of it for me, because you got that one-on-one. It wasn't like one guy had 6 guys or 8 guys out, like that NSU program or whatever. You literally got taken under the wing of one officer, and you maybe had another. For me, it was 2-on-1 in a sense, and they would take us to each individual project, and they would explain, this is what's going on in this one, and then then we spent a little time there, and then we went on to the next one, and then we went on to the next project, explaining like, this is what's going on here, and eventually you got it, and then it was mostly foot posts for the first year and a half, and then you got into a radio car, and then you'd start doing patrols, and then we would do these things called park walk and talk, where we would park the car for an hour, get out, and do community policing, and start talking to the people inside the project, saying, hey, if there's something going on over there and you want it corrected, let us know. And I think that was very special, because the older generation was definitely for it, not so much the younger kids and everything like that. They didn't like the presence, but people felt safe because we were there. Like, we were guarding their homes. That was pretty unique.
Right.
There were little perks inside the housing. We had blood days. The desk sergeant or the lieutenant would go, "Hey, Latanzio, Murphy, here's a slip. Get changed. Go back in civilian clothes. Go down. Donate blood, and see you tomorrow. Give us the receipt." It was blood day, so you got paid for the day to donate blood and everything like that. There were like little niches. It was moving around, going to like anti-crime, narcotics, or you know um, you know, even promotional wise and everything like that, moving through there was easier than you would be in the NYPD, because you're in the thousand range, where we were only maybe a couple thousand.
Right.
So that's why
That,
I would say it was like best kept secret.
that makes it a lot easier to learn your beat, and not just learn your beat, but to your point, learn the people that you're, as you say, guarding. And, I'll ask you, when it comes to that, doing the verticals, parking, walking, and talking, the NYPD talks a lot now about community policing, but that's the thing. So many guys and gals from housing have told me off the air, we were already doing it, Mike.
We were doing it.
You laid the mold.
Yeah.
So, you were already motivated enough as it was when you came on the job. But I imagine getting the chance to see these people up close and personal and learn them and learn their stories only added fuel to your proverbial fire to do this job.
100%, 100%, and there was a level of trust that was being built also.
Right.
And then there was like, you knew the people that didn't trust you, like you could just tell, and thank God for the good field training officers that I've had. Before you walked in a building, you always looked up, you watched out for the airmail, or you heard that cat call, the whoop whoop, echoing out through the courtyards. They were giving out the signal. Popo was coming through the projects. So they knew that back then. They kind of knew, clean up your act and let's move our operation somewhere else, because the cops are coming in.
Do you remember your first collar?
I do.
Tell me about it.
So my field, I can't remember for the life of me my field training officer's last name, but John, he had the same first name as mine, and it's like, all right, turn down your radio. We're gonna do a vertical. So we take the elevator up to the penthouse, up to the top floor. We walk up, and he's like, like you could hear like some rustling going on by the penthouse, which is the doors that lead to the roof.
Mhm.
And sure enough, there was a junkie up there, and he's shooting heroin. And then you could just see he was all disheveled and everything like that. And he had a little can of Coke next to him, Coca-Cola next to him and everything. And there was like these 3 empty glassines and a spoon on the step and everything like that. So, but I'm like, he's like, be careful. We put our heavy leather gloves on and start, just patting them down and everything, see what the hypodermic was. For the life of us, like we were saying, he's got all the stuff, but where's the needle? He dumped it in the aluminum can of the Coca-Cola. John picked it up, he rattles it, and it was inside the can. So, but we got him for the possession of the narcotic and the criminal trespass. So that was my first collar.
Do you feel with collars like that housing, so much is being discussed now about broken windows, do you guys feel like you were doing that back then too, before anybody really publicized it?
Yeah, I mean, so again, getting to the awareness portion, that the people were saying, like another quick story, like
Sure.
now I'm kind of like out on my own, and I'm doing a vertical, and I'm in the Rutgers houses, and I'm on the 6th floor, and and all of a sudden I hear, like, and this lady, she's got her apartment door cracked and everything like that, and she's pointing towards where the fire hose is stored, right by the staircase, and she's like, 6H, 6H, she's whispering, and I'm opening up, and the hose is gone, but the mechanism is still there. And I'm looking around, I can't see nothing, So she's going, she's like, up inside the pipe. So I reach up in there, and I shine my flashlight. Sure enough, I see like a brown baggie and a little zipper thingy. So I take my little little hook that we make to open up elevators, and I start grabbing at it, and I pull it out, and it's a bag full of rounds. Some narcotics are in there, and a small little 380 handgun falls out of the fire, you know, where the fire hose is stored.
Mm.
So she's going 6H, and I'm like, I can't go knock on the door 6H and say, "Hey, excuse me, is this yours?" You know. So
Here you go.
Yeah, so I give her the thumbs up, and she gave it up. She was scared of that element on her floor. So I wind up taking the stuff back. I voucher it as found property, but I do a confidential informant form, and I send it over to the to the plainclothes guys, and they wind up sitting on that place. They surveilled it. They wound up getting a warrant. They knocked on 6H, and they wound up collaring that guy like about a month later.
Yeah, because I feel like, and I wonder how it would be now. It'd probably be even better. We're talking with John Latanzio. This is volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. If they never merged, and I get why they merged, and there's good things about it too, the Detective Bureau of the Housing Police. We know Scott Wagner. He's a mutual friend of ours.
Incredible, yeah.
Incredible detective. And that whole bureau, I feel like, and this is no disrespect to the NYPD's Detective Bureau, which is great in its own right. That's one of the best detective bureaus, not just that New York has ever had in terms of police departments, but that America has ever had. They were terrific.
These guys, like you hear guys from the NYPD, flying out to other states to go hunt down guys. I mean, housing was doing that too. Like they were there, like obviously with, John Williamson, when the bucket came over and hit him in the head and he died. Like those housing detectives went down to Dominican Republic and they got that guy. They extradited him back to New York City.
Yeah.
So those guys were the best. No disrespect to the NYPD at all or anything like that. I'm just like that group of guys. They were very good at what they did. Those detectives. Everything that they do is spot on. Cross the T's, dot the I's. I totally loved housing. It was at first, I was a little nervous, but when I was there, absolutely loved it.
It's thorough with the capital T. And I'll add something to that story. I think the guy was going to hop on a plane to go back to DR and cool it there and lay low until the coast was clear for him.
Yeah.
They stopped that plane on the runway and got on there like something straight out of a movie. Scotty was telling me this. Yeah, Scotty, if I have the details mixed up a little bit, give me a call and let me know, so I don't do that again. And they got the guy in the middle of the plane, threw him down in the middle of the aisle, and brought him off that plane. I mean, that's police work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's justice for a good officer. And John Williamson, that incident occurred in October of 1993. So
he was in my sister company. He was in the company next to me. I was 9052. He was 9053. Yeah, he was in my sister company.
And he was getting in his patrol car. He was just getting into patrol car.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bucket comes flying off the roof and cracked him in the head.
Yeah, it was Spackle. One of the guys that you worked with, and you mentioned him to me off the air, and I want to hit on a couple things before I dive into your ERU and ESU years, is Paul Heidelberger. Another one, Paul. This was a time of.
Paul Heidelberger. Just a brief touch on Paul Heidelberger. He did a little bit of FTO work and everything like that, but he pretty much had a steady partner. But I had the pleasure of riding with Paul several times. I remember one of his lessons. So when we came out, we had 38 revolvers. We had the swivel holsters and everything like that. So I'm sitting in the car, and he's like, "Where's your gun, bro?" I'm like, "It's on my right hand side. It's on my right hand side." He goes, "No." He goes, "Take your belt, shift it, and you lay your revolver in your lap, like that. Trying to reach down for the revolver between the car seat and the door." He goes, "That's going to be a tough feat if somebody come up on us and everything like that." So when he drove, he always had it in his lap. And I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Tactic." And he was teaching me, tactics at that point. And I was like, "Wow." I was like, "Thanks, Paul." And then he that one stuck out in my mind a lot, and ever since then, that's how I rode around in the patrol car with my revolver laying on my right thigh, basically, and I just knew I had easy access to it while I was in the car and everything like that. So, and
That's
then,
gonna be.
unfortunately, he gets murdered in a bar in Queens, and yeah, it was very sad. So I got to be assigned to to the family a little bit on the day of the funeral. I mean, his partner at the time was actually assigned to the family. Yeah, that's me up in the left hand corner, and I was assigned to at that funeral to be there, as the for when they came out and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah, that was a tough period for you guys because this was 1992 when Paul was killed. Rudy Thomas gets gunned down the next year in 93. Again, he was off duty too. He was just sitting on his motorcycle minding his own business when somebody
yeah,
tried to come up and rob him.
PSA two coming down right down Pennsylvania Avenue over there. Unbelievable.
And then in 95, and this was the last line of duty death before you guys merged, Freddie Bosch, who was on the narcotics team, I think he bent down with a door breaker, and I guess because something went wrong when he was carrying up that equipment, it was a lot of stress on his body. He had a heart attack, and he died right then and there.
Yeah, Johnny Bosch's brother, Fred. It's just, again, small department, so it affected us, greatly because we knew these people, like you knew what was going on, and it was just a sad time for the household.
Undoubtedly, which is why I did want to ask about him, Paul Heidelberger specifically, just to, instead of focusing on this horrible nature in which he died, just as you said, how the good things he taught you, the tactics. You don't want to forget somebody like that. And,
hilarious guy. The guy was the jokester, and believe it, it's always that one guy that stands out. He was
the brightest of the job.
Unbelievably spot on. Exactly, Mike. So like he knew when to be serious, and he knew when stuff was had to be like spot on, and then afterwards, like, hey, you want to go out for a cocktail? You want to decompress? And
right.
Hey, I got tickets to go see the Knicks game, or he was a big fan of basketball from what I understand, and he even played in they had this like off-duty league of rollerblade hockey and everything like that. He was definitely the jokester, phenomenal individual, and just his life was cut short terribly.
Yeah. Peter Branzo's in the chat, retired NYPD lieutenant and author of street crime fame. He says, exactly, to your point, gun and lap, the old defensive tactic, always ready to rock and roll.
Yep, Pete, thank you for watching. I'm always chatting with Pete. He's really, he knows, he's the old school, how it was back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple other shout outs here in the chat. His better half, of course, Raquel. Hi, Raquel, Ruth Ann Griffin, and Michael Ferlazzo. He says, I want to thank you for your service. That's nice of you to say, Michael. So yes. I guess in that note, we can get into ERU. Now, Transit, I think, had already formed their own ERU, and Housing says, all right, we'll follow suit. And your journey into ERU, being among the original 44 cops to get there, was interesting. Why don't you tell us what happened?
So my partner at the time was Christine Burns, and we had picked up a late job, and we're heading back down Houston Street. And I'm like trying to put the blinders on because it's my dad's birthday and everything like that. And I'm like, Christine, I just want to get back home, for my father's birthday, so on and so forth. So she's like, yeah, let's go. So we're heading down, and sure enough, as luck has it, there's this woman. She's like doing jumping jacks, and I'm like, kind of drove past her. I'm not gonna lie. And then all of a sudden, she goes, "Did you see her?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Christine, I saw her." So she's like, so I, slammed on the brakes. We back up. I'm like, "Hey, how can we help you?" She goes, "You know that building over there? It's on fire." Just like that. I'm not even just adding to it. It was as simple as that. And like we followed her finger as she's like, and there's 3 windows deep, pure black smoke pumping out the ground floor, and people are just bailing out and they're yelling, "There's kids inside," so on and so forth. And so, we radioed it in that there was a fire at the Baruch houses, which is like 2 blocks off of the FDR Drive on Houston, corner Houston. We didn't give an address. We just said Houston and Baruch, send the fire department. And she's like, "What's the address?" I'm like, "They'll see it. They'll see it. Just send them." Like, no joke.
Follow the smoke.
Yeah, smoke pouring out. And there's this, I see this like hands holding a baby in diapers like out the window and everything like that. And I hop up on the wrought iron fence, and I'm like, all right, like, and just as I'm ready to, they fall back into the build. They fall back into the room, and I'm like, I'm here. I'm here. Pass it out. Pass them out. Pass it out. Didn't hear anything, and we made entry into the lobby, and again, it's weird. It's just fate. Like, there's a housing maintenance guy, and he's got a crowbar, and he's trying to work the door. Like, and I'm like, he's like, "Hey, I think I almost got it. Christine goes upstairs and she starts escorting the residents from the upper 2 floors, because there's a 3-story walk up. There's no elevator in this housing development. So I turn around. I'm like, all right, just press one more time, and I mule kick the door like 2 or 3 times, and it goes. The door pops open. Like, it goes in. So down on my hands and knees, I make entry into the kitchen, down the hallway, and I dump into the kitchen. I didn't know it was a kitchen at the time, but and there's nobody there, and I'm getting crushed with the smoke. So I retreat back out into the lobby, and now the sprinklers pop, and now water's pouring all over us and everything like that. And I can hear down the end of the hallway, like, they're yelling, "They're back here, they're back here, they're back here." So I was like, I'm getting myself drenched under the. I don't know nothing about firefighting at this point. I've seen Towering Inferno and stuff like that. And stuff like, I've seen all these shows where fire. And the heat was incredible, though. I could not believe that. I even made the push to get in. So I went in a second time, and I just I kind of really I lifted up my vest and my shirt to my face, and I'm covering up, and I like, where's the fireman? I'm like, go down there, and I actually step on one of the children, and that's unconscious on the floor. I scoop them up, and I start, coming back out. That's when the firemen started coming in and everything like that. So, all in all, the fire department gave us credit for the 6. I only had 1. I mean, but they, I kind of told the firemen their back room, and I started vomiting and throwing up. The smoke was incredible, and I get out into the hallway, and I go lights out, and then they took me up to Bellevue Hospital, and they treated me for the smoke and everything like that, and they did some tests on me, and they realized my blood gases were a little high and everything, so they wound up medevacing me up to Jacoby Hospital, and I had to go in the hyperbaric chamber and everything like that, and they decompressed me in the chamber, and they got all the poisoning out. I spent 2 days up in Jacoby, and then I came home. So basically, and then, but a couple days later, I got an invitation up to housing headquarters, and Chief Joe Keeney and Inspector Ziegler, they're like, "Hey, we got this we got your jacket in front of us." They're like, "What's this North Shore Rescue Squad that you belong to," and stuff like that. So I was like, "Ambulance, I'm an EMT, this, that, and the other thing, so on and so forth." And they're like, "We're thinking of starting an ESU. Would you like to
come on down?
You want to be in?" They're like, "We can't guarantee where you're going to be working. It's going to be a citywide unit, just like the NYPD has and everything like that." And I was like, "Yes, absolutely, 100%. I didn't care where they shipped me. I was like, I was in. If they saw something in me, then I was like, then I knew that whoever was being picked had something to bring to the table and everything like that. So I was like, I had no hooks. I have no family on the job or anything like that, and it was strictly by a good deed that I had done that almost cost me my life because I didn't know nothing about firefighting. You know, I probably shouldn't have done what I did, but you know, in hindsight, everything turned out right. So.
Yeah. That's above and beyond the call of duty, my friend. I mean, listen, and we're not that. This is '92. We're not that far removed from Frank LaSala from one truck getting killed in a fire in Manhattan.
Right.
You know, and did he have to be in there? No. And mind you, he had a Scott pack and everything on him, but unfortunately, there was a flashover. But if there were people to help, you know, who knows? Maybe there's those kids might not be alive today had it not been for your quick thinking. And Christine Burns too. I got to give her credit.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, but no, it was I was very excited about it. So.
Absolutely. I think anybody would be. And somebody here, I think you might know her, Jackie Latanzio, who's your sister, of course. I kid around.
Sister, yeah.
She says that was one of the scariest days.
She carries on the tradition. She carries on the tradition as EMT, so she loves that job. She loves doing it. Yeah.
Oh, good for her. All right. Well, thank you, Jackie, for what you do. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you tuning in tonight. Keep doing what you're doing. That was one of the scariest days and proudest days of being his sister. She says, and I can imagine. I can imagine that sibling love. There's nothing like it.
It's greatly appreciated. It doesn't go unnoticed. So
no, of course. So I have another photo here. You sent me so many great pics, and here is, I guess, the graduation ceremony in '92, and there you are, front and center. Yep. I think Steve Lanos is in there for the bomb squad.
Yep, Steve Lanos, Kazlaskis. You got Dave Martinez back there. I think Pete Linarello from 8 Truck. Yeah, I mean. That was the younger version of us, and that was a great time.
Hang on a second. Dave Martinez was housing?
There was a different Dave Martinez.
Oh, I'm thinking
Rick Martinez. You had Rick Martinez on, and now right. Little Dave Martinez was
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Dave from 7 Truck.
Yeah,
that one. It's Joe Dolan's partner. So yeah, I didn't know there was another Dave Martinez. Well, that's a great group there because like Lanos was in ESU. He saved John Murphy's life on 9/11, saved his arm, along with Joe Dolan, and then he's now in the bomb squad. I think he's still in the bomb squad, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure if no, I don't think Dolan's in either. I think he might be.
No. I'm talking about Lanos.
Oh, Lanos. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's.
Yeah, Lanos
hold the pin, as they say.
Yeah. Well, then I got to try to get him on the show. Let me go find Steve Lanos then. But no, listen, I love that because you go back and you see what so many of these men have gone on to do, and women, and you point to a photo like that. Like, who would have thought that among those cops graduating would go on to have such distinguished, outstanding careers?
Yeah. I actually have a few with John Coughlin. I have a few with Vinny Danz, and those.
He was in housing. They were both in housing. Richie Winwood, our friend, was in housing.
Richie Winwood. You got Stephanakis. Oh, the list is a cast of characters. I'll tell you that really, really great bunch.
I tell you, when
Chris Hanley went on to become a canine handler, he stayed for a long time. He was originally a 3 Truck guy, and then he went to canine. Yeah.
Yep, I remember him. I think he was on CBS News, featured about that very thing, handling canines. There's another guy I got to get on the show, Stephanakis, man. Great guy. When he retires,
he's the last one. He's the last hold. He says everybody else is a sellout. He's the last one. He's the last guy.
He's still carrying that tradition. When he leaves, man, so much history is going to leave with him because you don't see too many guys from Definitely OG not. Transit or OG Housing still on the job.
Exactly, and you know what? Again, I can't say it enough. Like you couldn't have picked a better bunch of men and women to be the first 44. It's like I'm very, very blessed and honored to have been with those guys and girls. Yeah, absolutely.
So you go through the training, you get equipped to be an E-cop. In housing, we only think, elevator emergencies because there's so many elevators in the projects, or maybe an EDP, but obviously it's so much more than that. The standard, excluding major events and major emergencies, the standard day in the life of a housing emergency rescue cop. Take me through it.
So, I mean, a lot of evidence searches, stuff being thrown down the trash compactors, water emergencies where they can't get the pipes shut off and it's a weekend and housing maintenance ain't around and, we have to mitigate, stuff like that. we kind of lightened the load on the fire department on like gain entry for people that were down and they couldn't get to the door because they fell or they were stuck between the wall and the toilet or something like that. So like, and the cops were getting tired. The housing cops were getting tired because the firemen were just blowing doors off the hinges and everything like that. And we became very good lock pickers, and we finessed a lot of these doors to where we could resecure the apartments. And these housing cops were like, "Thank you, I don't have to sit on this apartment until they come back and fix this thing." So I mean, there's so many things, and occasionally we get the jumpers up, or somebody wants to hang out a window, and yeah, a lot of shootings, evidence searches, shell casings in the courtyards of these gangs that were taking over some of these housing developments and stuff like that. Yeah, it was not a good time in the 90s with the crack epidemic and everything like that.
Yeah, that was well. Those were the war years essentially of the housing police. Excuse me. So I want to share my screen here for a second because what I love about the REPs, I don't think you guys had the heavy rescue trucks, but you did have REPs. And here's one of them here from March of 1994, responding to a job. You guys pretty much, with the exception of heavy weapons, had everything on this truck.
Yes, we did. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we basically had everything but the heavy weapons. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, anything at any time, and man, that's I love. You probably borrowed some trucks from the old Transit ERU or old NYPD SUs
Yeah,
that they weren't going to use anymore.
so Transit stepped up immensely. They were the first ones to say, hey, we'll train you guys. And they started, showing us how to lift trains. They showed us how to evacuate, people out of the tunnels and everything like that. And we got some Hurstel training from them. And, they walked us through like some of the electrical emergencies and how to call power off, flagging the conductor and the motorman. So we got a lot of bridge climbing because a lot of trains cross a lot of bridges. So we got some bridge climbing time. Because these trains could stall anywhere. So whether it's obviously you're seeing it's happening a lot in the city now. Underground, people are down there for 2-3 hours.
Right.
At a time. Sometimes I think Madeline Lawrence told you a story about one that collided. One rear-ended another on a bridge. On a bridge. Like that's some heavy-duty stuff. So like if we're there, they wanted us to cross-train with them. Learn the ins and outs of the workings of that. So, and so that worked out tremendously for us. And then the other department that stepped up before NYPD trained us was Port Authority. Port Authority had offered us a lot of training, at their airports, the World Trade Center, doing the repels in the elevator shafts and everything like that. Because I don't think too many people know. There's blind shafts where the cars can speed 10, 20 stories without stopping and everything, but there's no doors on them. So that's why they speed up so fast to the top and everything like that. Other cars could go to every floor. Some cars are just dedicated to like the 1/3 of the tower, and then the other one maybe go 2/3 of the tower. And then, there were a lot. A lot of elevators in the World Trade Center.
99 of them. And I guess that segues perfectly into February 26, 1993, because it was all hands on deck. And I think, as Chief Anamone told me, it was Kurt Wargo, who, if you're listening, Kurt, can you please come on the show? I'm trying to find you, pal. Thank you very much. Great captain in ESU. So he was in charge that day pretty much of the whole operations. And not only does he have his own guys, he has Transit ERU who comes down to the scene because it's all hands on deck, like I said. And you guys from housing coming down. I know you were there because you told me off the air, getting down there, being in that building.
No, negative.
Okay.
93, we were out at Floyd Bennett Field. We were actually being trained when all that went down. That was like the beginning of the merge. That's where we were. So we were not at the first. I know I was not at the first.
Deduct me 5 points.
Yeah.
My bad.
So, we were told, that while we were out at Floyd Bennett Field, that we might be going down there later on when everything was over, and then it was like that more of like evidentiary recoveries and stuff like that, and doing stuff like that. I never personally was there for the '93 bombing. No, not at all.
No, to all the other podcasters out there, before you continue with something, never presume, always ask, because otherwise you look like a dummy. But that obviously was something that challenged a lot of ESU's operations that day, certainly the fire department. And I imagine it was a template going forward for training, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know, like, so in the '93 bombing, we had heard like a fireman was doing a search, and then all of a sudden he fell in.
Kevin Shea from Rescue 1.
Yeah, right. And they were like, so these were eye openers for us, like future training and stuff like that. When you're going in, you'd be more prepared to be obviously tied in, because if this is an event, not an accident, you would want to be on your game in a sense. So you needed to be. You just didn't want it to happen again, and especially for us, or I'm sure the fire department wouldn't want it to happen to their guys ever again. So it's a learning experience and stuff like that. So as far as templates and stuff like that, and you learn off of mistakes and everything. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. It's a good thing in order to continue the proactivity of the police department, especially its special operations division. So the process in the merge is starting to happen. There's rumors of it. Nobody really believed it, at least the old timers didn't. It almost happened soon. It almost happened September of '94, but it was blocked, I think, in the courts, if I'm not mistaken.
You know what? I wasn't even following it that much, because my head was in the training, and
right.
And in '90, and then we got trained, and then I wind up getting sent to 5 truck, and I still was wearing my housing ESU uniform, because like you said, we really weren't there, but we were there.
Right.
So it was very, very strange for us to be still in our housing uniforms, but assigned to trucks for a little while.
Right, at a given time. So going out to Staten Island in Truck 5, and this is John Latanzio, this is Volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. The misconception about Staten Island is, it's not a lot of work. It ain't like the other boroughs. The joke is the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. But we know that's not true. There's a bevy of things to do out there, and I'm sure the guys in Truck 5 can most certainly tell you. What was your interpretation? I mean, you grew up in Staten Island, so I imagine going to Truck 5, you knew better than to give into that notion.
Yeah, so absolutely a slower pace, I would say. Not as much workload, like intensive workload or anything like that. But when it came, it was never like the easy one. It was always something chaotic or something extreme, like you couldn't even like script it or write it. Like it was a big job. It was a big job. Like
right.
it just came at you out of nowhere. You never saw it coming.
What's the first major job you can recall in Truck 5?
So, basically, I had just finished up my midnight shift, and I'm out running errands. I have a couple of newborns home and everything like that. And I'm over in a gas station. I'm filling up my car, and all of a sudden I hear shots ringing out. And I look over across the gas station, and there's a 122 car with 2 guys pinned down behind a car. And there's a guy with a rifle, an old 30-30 lever action, and he's shooting at the 2 patrol officers on the corner of Jakes Avenue and Highland Boulevard. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on? I'm just trying to get gas in my car, So I see a large 2-yard cubicle dumpster, and I start rolling it up, and I'm like yelling to the guys. I'm like, I think I can get you some, cover. So I'm just have my gun trained, my off duty. I'm just training on the window, and the rifle came back out. I couldn't get a shot, and these guys just unloaded into the window, and they got him. They hit him and they drove him back into the house and everything like that. And then it turned into like an 8-hour standoff. The guy was like yelling, "I'm hit," but he didn't want to give up the gun, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it was one of the longest standoffs on Staten Island for a while. And the guy succumbed to his injuries. He died. So, but
too bad.
they brought the robot out. They did everything. It was probably one of the most, from beginning to end, to see it like that was incredible.
I'd like to thank that gentleman for succumbing because he saved the taxpayers of New York a trial. So thank you, sir, for not making
Daryl Shanley. He eventually became an ESU cop from that incident. So yeah, he's the one that what
story?
Got him under the armpit. Like he had the rifle. Like he caught him right under the armpit. Like the guy was reaching out with the rifle. And Daryl Shanley, he got a good train and he got a good beat on him, and they laid suppressive fire back at him, and the round got him.
You're better than me, because if I see that happening, I'm like, yeah, I'll be easy. I hope everything works out. I'm going to be right here. And then you will hear screaming in high octaves as I run for the nearest.
Again, in hindsight, and I'm thinking about it, when it was all said and done, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even have a vest on. I'm like, I was in civilian clothes. I'm like, what is going on? Like,
but that was the cop in you, my friend.
I was like, what am I doing? Like, not second guessing myself. I'm like, holy cow, that could have been really bad,
Mm. Yeah, but you were willing to put yourself in harm's way, and that's, once a cop, always a cop. Once fireman, always fireman. It never leaves you. Never. It's always going to be a part of you, and that's the beauty of it. That you were willing to step in a situation like that without any regard. Maybe you thought about it later. Obviously, you just mentioned that you thought about it later, but in that moment, hey, I'm a cop. Let me try to help my brothers here from somebody who was trying to kill them. And maybe even if you weren't able to get a shot off, just by virtue of you shouting out, "Hey, I can get you guys covered," and taking out your gun, those seconds might have saved them. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, again, I was just trying to see, because they really weren't in a good spot. From my vantage point, they might have thought they were, but because that guy had like the eagle, the high advantage on them, even though they thought maybe they had it and everything, but it all worked. Listen, that was the happy ending. Everybody went home. That's all that mattered to me. The wife was okay. It was a domestic call apparently, and she could call the cops saying he's nuts, he's crazy. There's something going on, and he's got a gun. And then everything else unfolded that way.
So, a couple of things I want to ask you from 1996. There was in April, I think it was March, April, around this time. Might have been a little bit earlier, but either February through April, we get the blizzard of 96, which is like one of the craziest blizzards New York City has ever had. Now, in heavy weather situations, given the equipment that the ESU possesses and the expertise in these matters that they possess, and obviously the heavy duty rescue truck, you'll go out and assist people if need be. What do you remember from that blizzard?
Oh, I mean, 96, the snowstorm, not so much. I mean, a lot of stuck cars. I mean, we had the REPs, and we would J-hook some cars out of the drifts, and we were actually supporting the precinct guys. Like Dave Brink tells a great story. Like when the cars were coming in, they didn't have a jack to put chains on the cars and everything, on the patrol cars and everything like that. So this is what we do. Like this is, these guys are like, they were in the snow, and one at a time in the garage, put the chains on, let the car go out. Like that speaks volumes for the patrol guys, because like I always said, you don't ever want to forget where you came from, in a sense. And then when they see, ESU guys putting chains on their RMPs to go out in the snow, or they got stuck in a drift, and we, instead of waiting for a tow truck or something like that, we went out with the truck and put a J-hook and got them off a stuck of ice or in a snowbank. These guys are like, can I buy you a cup of coffee?
What's the limerick? Anytime, baby.
Anytime, anywhere.
Anytime, anywhere. And the other thing is, and I go back to the photos that you sent me, July of 96, again, everybody, all hands on deck, TWA Flight 800 goes down. And you were out there, and this is one of the more devastating aircraft tragedies, not just in New York history, but certainly in American history. That flight took off that night. It exploded over East Mauritius and it went down. ESU went out there in their boats and they were trying to get the debris collected and the bodies too. Tell me about being out there.
So, yep, there's the late Joe Vigiano. He's right there, and that's collecting some of the debris. Scotty Wahlberger was on that in that boat, I believe, also. That's so the call was for all the Zodiacs that the department had go out, either trailer them out or go up to Randall's Island, put it on a big ship, the biggest launch, harbor launch that we have, and get out there. So we did. We trailered the Zodiac up to Randall's Island. We put on one of the launches, and then we get out there. That morning, the sun is breaking, and there was like this eerie fog across the water, and there was still, believe it or not, little pieces of debris still floating and a little bit burning. But that sheen of the fuel across the top and the smell of the jet fuel across the water was incredible. We didn't recover any bodies. We did recover a lot of material out there as far as of the wreckage and everything like that. And it was slow. It was long, a little painstaking. You were hoping, but all the evidence, you kind of knew that you weren't really going to find anybody out there.
I think at that point it was just a matter of, obviously, if you were on the for the divers that had to recover the bodies, recovering them with dignity. If you were on that assignment, and the evidence, is the answer definitive? And I've covered this with the bomb squad guys. Danny McNally was on to talk with me about that, as was Don Sadawi. Is it definitive 25, 26 years later? No. But without the preservation of the evidence and the collection of it, and good collection, not sloppy at that, we would have never even had a glimpse into what might have went down had it not been for you guys playing your part as you did.
I am totally agreeing with everything you're saying, because even with all the evidence that we collected, sometimes the explanation does not ring true in me. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist.
No, of course not.
But from my perspective and what I saw, it told a different story. And I don't want to say they're lying or they're doing this or whatever. It just, some things sometimes just don't add up in a sense. And
that was one of them.
But I accept it, but something still lingers in the back of me and says, I just can't for the life of me think that is how it happened for those people.
And, as I said before, I think I told this to Don, there's only two entities that can answer what happened that night: the people that were on that plane and the big man upstairs. And neither one of them are going to tell us, unfortunately.
Not until we meet them. That would be one of the questions, like John Kennedy and Flight 800.
Flight 800. I don't blame you. So I want to go to 1999, Valentine's Day of 1999, and I promised I would mention him tonight, and I believe his wife is watching, and ma'am, I say hello to you, and I thank you, if you are watching, for tuning in. And it's Matthew Dziergowski I'm referring to. It was an accident that Truck 5 responded to. You guys do a lot of MVAs in ESU. I believe this one was an oil overturned truck that you guys were originally responding to. And then a truck driver came out of nowhere, and that's when Matt comes in, and I'll let you tell the story from there.
Yeah, so we get called out for an overturned tractor trailer on the West Shore Expressway, and there's a jug handle that runs into the Richmond Parkway, also known as the Korean War Veterans Memorial Parkway, I believe they call it now also. And the truck driver of the tractor trailer didn't realize that it's cars only, and he took the turn a little too hard on this jug handle, and he rolled the tractor trailer over, and they were getting a lot of reports that the driver couldn't exit the vehicle. So we respond out there, and just shortly before we arrive, the driver had self-extricated himself. My partner at the time was Mark Mussarella, and
He's watching.
Yep, there he is right there, my buddy. So we made a conscious decision to continue in just to see maybe if we can help out, so on and so forth. The one highway patrol that was working that night was down doing the accident report and investigation part of it. Nobody was died or anything like that. But the 123 precinct had put 2 patrol cars up at the high end of the highway, and they were diverting traffic off the West Shore Expressway out towards the Outer Bridge crossing. And luck has it that there was some minor construction being done in that vicinity also. So these guys all took it upon themselves, put these big orange barrels out, some cones, flare patterns. One car's facing north, one car's facing south. So the 2 drivers are like kind of talking to each other. Very, very cold night, February 14th, Valentine's Day. And so me and Mark are down by the tractor trailer, and the truck had impaled itself on a couple of small trees and everything. So we assisted the tow company and the recovery company with cutting these trees down with the chainsaw and everything like that. And they'd rig up the chains, and they were in the process of lifting the truck up, and all of a sudden you heard this like kabang, like bang, like so. And I'm like, I thought maybe it was like the tractor trailer cinching down on the chains, or like the tractor trailer was cracking apart as they were starting to lift it. And I think it was Felix Torres from Highway 5. He jumps out of the RMP. He goes, "It's them. It's them. It's back there. They, the RMP is wrecked." So me and Mark jump in the truck and we zip up there, and the scene was incredible. Like, I've never seen like an RP get hit so hard from a guy that drove through the barrels and everything. Apparently he says he was tired, fell asleep, whatever, and that's a whole nother aspect of it. But truth be told, Matthew Dziergowski, this guy does the unthinkable. He's actually facing the car that's coming at everybody, and he engages the RMP into drive, and he pulls the car forward, and he gets it to turn just enough to save his partner, no less. And us back there, like
extension.
He's thinking about everybody else but himself, this guy, and he has the frame of mind to yell out, "It's coming," to the other 2 guys in the other RP that they're sitting next to, and he perishes. I don't know where it comes from, but he manages to take the full impact of this car. He saves his partner, Godfred. He saves these other 2 cops that are in the other RMP. I am 100% sure that my partner and I, we talk about it often. Matthew Dziergowski is always thought of, and we thank him for doing what he did. That's a big game changer in my life. I can't say I could have been killed, but I know it's very possible that had he gone through, he would have probably impacted the highway car and us and the tow truck company down on the curve, a football field lengths down the road. Like, an amazing, true word to the hero that guy is.
And I can't even, and I was looking down because I was processing the scene in my head and listening to you tell that story. As we talked about earlier with Paul Heidelberg, it's always the best and the brightest at the job, and he won the Medal of Honor for that, as he should have, because
posthumously, yeah, they awarded him. He saved a lot of brother officers, and he saved that tow truck company crew down there. I mean, me and Mark, we get there within minutes. I mean, within seconds after the, not minutes, with seconds. And, we whip the tool out. We start, we got his partner out first. We made a conscious decision. That was the easiest one to get to. So we get Godfrey out of the passenger seat. And then we start working the car and cutting the car away and everything. And, it's the heartbreaking portion of it for us is, all the training, all the equipment in the world. And, you run it through your head a lot. And you say, what? And the result is there was nothing else that we could have really done. It took us a while to accept it.
To come to terms with it.
Yeah.
I imagine. Yeah, it doesn't get easy, but I think the best thing to do is to try to live your best life in honor of someone like that, as they would want you to. And that was the purpose, Matt, Dziergowski, saving yourselves and all the other individuals who were there that night. It wasn't so you guys could go on to live a negative life. It was so that you guys could make the most of that opportunity. And I'm sure every day you and your partner who's in the chat tonight, Mark, are doing your best to do just that.
Yeah, I mean, again, not, it's not every single day we think of them, but I know like it just resonates, something just clicks and you're like, wow.
Absolutely. I asked this to my last guest when he was on for my FDNY miniseries, Y2K, when that came around. And I don't think I've ever asked an ECOP about this. The FDNY was doing a bunch of different things in anticipation of the year 2000. What were you guys doing over it? This is around the time you went to Truck 3 too. So what were you guys doing in ESU and prep for that?
Yeah, so like we're hearing like planes are gonna fall out of the sky. The computers are gonna reset. And stuff's gonna go blank. Could be like they were afraid that the power grid was gonna go down because they didn't think that they could, like, everything couldn't recognize 00000. Like they were like, oh my god, like everything's just gonna come to a screeching halt, and we're gonna be like in the Stone Age for a couple of days. So I mean, obviously, prepare for generators and this and that, and but it was pretty much the same old because it was New Year's Eve. We still had the teams down at the ball drop. We still had the counter snipers and all that other stuff. Large event. Like you preparing for a possible incident. You always thought like that, with thousands, tens of thousands of people coming to the epicenter of New York to watch this. And the light stayed on.
Nothing happened, and that was the thing. I was just like, I would have loved in hindsight, obviously as they say, hindsight's 2020. But I would have loved to have gone back in time if time machines were real and just been there in the city during the summer of '99 in the lead up to 2000, just to see how crazy people were going. Because listen, nobody had ever, at least at that time, nobody had ever lived through a millennium before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure there's people out there like, oh my God, like the world, the sky's gonna fall, or there's people out there that bought into it, or like, and obviously like the full moon theory and all that other stuff, and the crazies come out and so on and so forth. Yeah, but,
zombie apocalypse.
The zombie apocalypse.
A quick point on Dziergowski here. I had a couple of photos here that you sent me, and that was what the scene looked like, and you could see his REP, or excuse me, RMP right there.
His RP is on the left. Yeah. The red Durango in the middle, and then the Jeep Cherokee was. I can't remember the other two officers from the 1, 2, 3 that were there, but a little bit of pressure was on us at the scene and everything, because like Maria, his wife Maria, was expecting their second child and everything like that, and I know that just added to the pain for her and everything like that. And the officer's like, hey, can you like step it up? And like, he's gonna have a kid soon, you know, like, and you just focus in on the job, the mission, and we did get him out pretty quick, and we started the oxygen, we started CPR on him and everything like that, and it just wasn't meant to be, unfortunately.
Not in the cards for that evening. The injuries were severe, but like I said earlier, same thing with Paul Heidelberger. The memory certainly lives on. Just a quick, I guess, we can hit on it briefly. 9/11, you sent me some photos of that as well, which I'll show in a moment. When did you get down there that day?
So the plane had smashed in. I was off duty. The first plane had struck the tower already. That is actually flight 587 down the Rockaways.
My apologies. Let me find the right photo. Yep, here we are.
Yep. So the first plane had already smashed into the tower. Conflicting reports. I was off duty and I already was kind of like going to be doing a moonlight gig down in the city. So I was like already heading into the city when everything was going down, and then I diverted into the Bronx, and I got to the command. I just knew something was not right. I rang the phone at the command, and I believe it was Jim Malley. He's just yelling, everybody in, everybody in, everybody in. And then all of a sudden I heard the second report of the second plane striking, so on and so forth. So I get into the command, and I'm like, where is everybody? This guy's here. Danz is there, and Jerome and Wally, so on and so forth. Everybody's out except for Eddie Lutz and Jim Malley. They were in the truck, and they still had to provide coverage for the people of the Bronx. So they were there to respond to other calls, which there were many going on as well. Even though 9/11 was unfolding, there was a lot of other chaotic stuff going on out there. That it's another story for stories. So Everett Taylor, Rodell, and Tyrone Tillman, the four of us, we kind of like got there all at the same time, and we had nobody to tell us what vehicles to take or whatever, but I knew that this was probably going to be a prolonged operation down there, so I decided to take the MLG, which is a multi-lighting generator truck with a tower on the back of a small pickup truck. I had a big KV generator on it. So Everett Taylor comes in with me, and as we're leaving quarters, the south tower had fallen down. So I'm like, here it is. We're gonna be there for a long time. We're going down the West Side Highway. We get by Canal Street. The North Tower is still, gushing out smoke and debris and everything still falling, raining out of it. But occasionally a jumper or a body falls out, so on and so forth. And we got up pretty close. Like we got our vehicles almost right where that north bridge was. We were in that vicinity over there.
With the one that had like the windows on it, the white one that would take you across. I think it's like a skywalk or something like that.
Yeah, it was like a skywalk. We were just prior to that. Pretty much, we were dead even with the Verizon building, but you could see where that bridge was. So we're all gearing up, putting belts on, blah blah blah, and I'm listening to TAC G, and there's chatter. Everything it's controlled chaos, but it's chaos. So like we have our group of guys, and then all of a sudden, like we were just about getting into there, and then they're like, I believe aviation says something to the effect that like the North Tower looks like it's starting to lean, and we were like, if the South one did it, it's not going to be good for us. So we kind of like take a step back a little bit, and sure enough, boom, come down. That whole thing with the dust, caked, covered, so on and so forth, boom, done. So, and then that night, we all regrouped, and then we went in, after everything was done. And that night we were just starting to do, whatever recovery or searches that we can do down there. and there was that report of the two Port Authority guys being pinned over by
Menno McLaughlin. Yep.
yeah, and Scotty Strauss is over there and everything like that. So I think they rigged up a like a traverse line, and they were getting ready to put him in a Stokes basket and get him out that night. So yeah, it was. And then from there, I did 360, 70 hours down there. I've recorded hours down at just the pit. The ground zero, whatever they labeled it. But my one happy story down there though is in February, middle of February, just around this time, we had there was a single beam in the southeast quadrant of the pit standing over there, and all of a sudden I see like these two Port Authority cops going like in this scissor jack basket, and they're raising the basket up and everything like that, and they whip out a stencil and they start spray painting PAPD 37. So I'm like, yo, listen, yo, whistling up to the guys, and they lower the basket down and everything like that. So I'm like, I want to go up there with you guys. So they're like, yeah, come on in. So I jump in the basket, back up we go. They finish painting theirs. So they're like, and the guys down in the thing are like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna put on there? Like, somebody yells out, ESU 14. I'm like, I knew that was not gonna happen. I was like, there was 23 of us lost. So I start freehand NYPD, and the D, I just missed the edge of the beam for the D, but I get it in there and I kind of clean it up just enough, and then I do the 20 with the 2, and I stop for a second, and I'm like, the 3. I'm gonna do the truck 3 flat symbol, and I spray paint the 3 of the 20 for the 3 that eventually we found out we had lost 3 from 3 truck. We thought it was more. We had not known who else, so on and so forth, was, so as far as that, we just knew that we had lost the 23 that day, and I was like, I'm doing
that was you that put that on there.
I spray painted the NYPD 23 up on it.
I have been to the museum. I went with my family back in 2016, and I saw that beam. It has FDNY 343 on it.
Yeah.
And
that
I
was
didn't know you did that.
That made up for like everything that bad in my bad that I've experienced. That was one of my proudest moments, because I know even though we lost 14 superstar guys, but no, we lost 23 talented police officers, detectives, sergeants. Like, I was never ever gonna be a thought in my mind to just put us over them, because it was the job. For me, it was the job representing what we all did down there that day.
Yeah. No, thank you for telling that story. That hit me right here. You almost got me, John. You didn't quite get me. Thank you. Wow, I never knew that. You learn something new every day, because that beam, it hangs in that museum, and it is one of the more popular stops within the museum. And I do have a photo of myself in front of it, or not in front of it. One that I took of it, I should say, and it's sobering to look at. So very well done, Lieutenant Pranzo was saying in the chat, and very well done indeed. We'll hit on a couple more things.
Yep.
This has been a great conversation, and I'm going to have to bring you back sometime for part 2, because I know there's things tonight that we didn't even get to.
Not a problem, Mike. I'm sorry, but
no, it's fine.
I couldn't squeeze it in all in one night, but
no, it's okay. We're
Yeah.
not, but we're not done yet though, because there is a couple of other things I do want to ask you about, and I know that you were down at the scene the night that Detective Dan Eshantegi was killed, interrupting a robbery off duty in the line of duty. Um, Tell me about getting down there. I guess you talked earlier about evidence search. Tell me about that.
That night, Ancient Taggy was off duty, and he hears his neighbor's glass breaking, and he dials 911, and he's reporting a burglary in progress of his neighbor's house on Arnell Place, which is he's a couple doors down off of Westchester Avenue under the L. So me and my partner at the time, Billy Falk, we got a call from the field saying, "Hey, listen, there's going to be an emergency excusal warrant. You know, you got to go to the 4-8. You know, meet up with Ford truck. You're gonna take down a door or something like that." So it's like, all right, no problem. So we made it our business to go into quarters and rest up for a few minutes and just go over the truck, make sure all our equipment was working. You know, make sure the door breaker would most likely, because it's not our area, we'd probably be the breach team. So like we kind of knew like what we were going to be doing. So I'm like, Billy, it's time to go. You know, so we get in the truck and we start going up the Bronx River Parkway and get off at Rosedale Avenue, and we're just about to loop onto the Cross Bronx Expressway, and also over SOD. All of a sudden, you hear, you know, 1013 in the 4-5 precinct. You know, off duty officers reporting a burglary in progress. So I'm like, Billy, stop. You know, stop. You know, he's driving. Stop at the light. You know, just pull over to the side. So switch the radio over to division. I'm listening. I don't hear nothing. It's quiet like a church mouse. I say it maybe like a minute or so later. Beep 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 comes over to 4345, and the same thing. You know, 1013 officer reporting, you know, burglary in progress. You know, all of a sudden, like, you hear the excitement from this. I want to say it was like 4-5 Henry. For some reason, I don't know what the sector code, you know, assignment was, but they're like, we hear shots fired coming from that direction. We're at the 7-Eleven. Like, it, you know, start sending units over here. Like, that shots out, you know. So I'm like, Billy, let's go. Boom. So like we zip down onto the Cross Bronx, and we're there in like 3 minutes. Like, we come in underneath the L, and I see these two, you know, see this one officer. He's holding these two guys at gunpoint. They're bleeding out. They're shot multiple times. They're on the corner, and he's going. My partner's down, you know, down the street. You know, he's down there. You know. So next thing you know, we see him like trying to get Ancient Teggy off his side and onto his back and everything, and rolling him over. And me and Bob Mancini, another ESU guy who runs in with the truck, um, he comes down. He's like, I'm like, I ain't got nothing, you know. So he's like, all right, let's go start CPR. So start putting you know, airway in, open them up. We don't see no blood. We don't see he's shot, nothing. So we just start doing CPR. Start, you know, opening them up. And the minute we exposed his chest, there it was. It was the one single gunshot, and just like off to the left side of his chest. And I'm like, oh my god, no. So we're waiting, you know, not waiting, but we're hearing an ambulance is supposed to be en route, and it had snowed the night before significantly, like, and it's cold.
Yeah,
The
it's
worst,
December.
it's always the worst conditions. Like, it just nothing ever kind of like it goes easy for you when crap hits the fan. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, you know, like, I tell the guy, I'm like, get that radio card down here. Like, we get him on a longboard, and we start putting him in the backseat of an RP, and we start backing up like, we're saying, you know, Central be advised, we're gonna be coming in a radio car with this guy, you know. So we get all the way up to the top of Westchester Avenue, and the ambulance shows up. So we transfer him out of the car. We get him into the ambulance. You know, they got more stuff. It's warm. So, and we get him into the ER and everything like that. And the doctors are like, they knew we were coming. They were ready. And they hook him up, and they're like, he's got a pulse. He's got a pulse. Not a good one, but he's got a pulse. and they kept him enough. They were getting ready to transfer him upstairs to surgery, and I don't know who or how it happened, but they get his dad into the ER, and his dad comes in and he starts like holding. Meanwhile, Anshitegi never regains consciousness. Never. He's lights out the whole time, and the father's just saying to him, "It's okay, like it's okay, son. I'm here," so on and so forth. And next thing you know, like all the bells and whistles start going off again. So they ask him to step aside and try working him up for a little while longer. I say maybe like 45 minutes later, and they called it. It was over. And these guys, all the guys from the 4-0 were coming in because that's the command that he worked at, even though he lived in the 4-5. And I remember like delegates and so on and so forth, and the doctors are amazing. They clean up Daniel Anshitegi, and they get him and they put him in another room, like a room, private room, and everybody just started like holding hands and start reciting, our Father who art in heaven, and start praying for him, and just saying, like he was one of the youngest cops that I've ever seen, and again, another devastating blow to the NYPD for this guy, Lilo Brancato and Steve Armento. Lilo Brancato, and so-called actor, and not to get political, but he does a dirty deed, breaking into a house to steal pain medication. That's the gist of the story of why they selected this house for the prescribed drugs that were in there. And Anshitegi interrupts it, and he winds up capturing these guys. He shot them and stopped them, but he paid with his life.
I think he hit Brancato twice and he hit Armento 6 times.
Yeah.
So his last act was.
So he's got 8 rounds in his gun, and every round hit. He had 100% hit for his Car 9 9mm.
Yeah. Before we get to the concluding segment, I do want to end on a light note. And I'm really hoping you were there for this. Were you there for the Miracle on the Hudson?
No, I was not.
Yeah.
I was not.
All right. Because that one I know ESU went down there for, obviously the FDNY, and I know, well, it was a citywide job, so I imagine that 3 Truck had to have been there. I was hoping you were there for that, because this is right around the time that you called it a career, which you did in 2010. But I mean, I guess I can ask in replacement of that question, when you did leave in 2010, before I get to rapid fire, what were you proudest of upon stepping out of the job after all that you had done and been through?
Just like the everyday's ins and outs of being there for patrol. Like we have the oath, our own motto: when people need help, they call the cops, and when the cops need help, they call the emergency service. And I never ever hesitated how meek or how extreme the job was, and I've never ever frowned upon patrol or anything like that. I just was like, I knew where I came from, and I knew that if they were asking me for help that maybe they couldn't figure it out, I was there to make it go away or make it easier for them. And those are the proudest moments. Just the simplest jobs and the gratifying thank you that I got from those patrol officers saying, appreciate it. That, I don't want to sit on that forever.
It is now time for a concluding segment. Of course, rapid fire, 5 hit run questions from me, 5 hit run answers from you. And Mike Filazzo says, and I promise this will be the case when I bring John back for part 2. Next time, more happy stories. Sorry about that, Michael. I promise that that'll be the case when John comes back. So we'll get to rapid fire now. Are you ready?
Yes.
First, funniest call you ever responded to, and if it's not G-rated, you can say pass.
So it is probably the funniest story. Most people probably have heard it. Billy Falk again, fresh new face right after 9/11, and he's the first graduating class. He goes straight to Midnights. He works with me, and we get called out to Calvary Hospital on an animal condition. Animal conditions are probably the most hilarious jobs for me ever. So they're not saying what it is or what's going on. So Calvary Hospital is like 2 blocks over from Jacoby. And we get there and they're like, 3rd floor. So I go up to the 3rd floor. The night security guard goes up there and the charge nurse is like, there's a bat flying around in the patient's room. I'm like, what? A bat? And she's like, I'm telling you, it's a bat. So I was like, all right, no problem. So I go in there and she goes, oh, I wanted to tell you, the patient that's in there, he cannot be moved. He's had like quadruple bypass. He's had like organs replaced, like a lung transplant. He's got the thing in his neck. He's got 2 big poles, IVs, blood filtration system, so on and so forth. And I'm like, oh, like, this is really complicating things, like, oh God, like, so I'm like, all right, I'm holding it together. I don't want to let on, so I go in the room and I don't turn on the lights because it's not, I don't see anything flying around. But the patient, he's like, you could like, he can't talk, but he's like Darth Vader. And I'm like, that? And he goes like this. And he points to the curtains. So I'm like, okay, I got this. I said, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. And all of a sudden he's like, he's looking at me wide-eyed. He's like, just like, leave it alone. It's not bothering me. Like, leave it alone. I'm like, no. Guy, we can't leave a bat flying around in your room, especially you got blood in the thing. You got an IV bag and blood hanging next to you. So I radio over to Billy. I'm like, Billy, get the animal control kit, get the fishing net, and get the CO2 fire extinguisher. I said, bring it all up. Comes up with it. So we devise a plan. I'm like, listen, I said, you're taller than me. Billy is a big boy, tall. I'm like, when I pull the curtain back just enough, I want you to take the cone of the fire extinguisher. I want you to blast it. And I'm going to catch it with the net, like that. So Billy's like, I just want to let you know, STS never taught us this. Like, I'm like, Billy, Billy, don't worry. Don't worry about it. I'm like, it's going to be okay. I'm like, so just to back up just a little bit, I get the guy, the super of the hospital. I'm like, hey, you got to turn off the fire alarms and everything like that because this thing's probably going to trigger stuff like that. And I asked the doctor, like, listen, I'm going to do this. I said, just stand by. I said, he might get excited. I don't know. I'm hoping he won't, But so I look over at the patient. I'm like, just close your eyes, please. Just close your eyes. I promise. And he's like almost crying. He's like, oh, he kind of gives in. He's like, I'm stuck in the bed. Where can I go? So I'm like, Billy, now, he lets it go, blast the air, so on and so forth, the net. And I'm like, I look over at the guy. I told you I was going to get this thing. And he's like, and he gives me the big thumbs up. And he's like, he's giving me the frown and everything. We get this thing, we take it out. Everybody's happy, so on and so forth. Billy goes like this. Then we get back, we put everything away. He goes, how'd you know that was going to work? I said, I didn't. I didn't. I'd never done it before. But we, this is what we do, though. We think outside the box, Like, right. I had heard stories about, like, doing this stuff. It was the first time for me, too. But, no, we went and had breakfast that morning. We look at each other. We crack up all the time talking about that bat.
Mr. Falazzo in the chat, there you go. There's your happy story. Second favorite tool in the rescue truck.
Obviously the Hearst tool, but they were all there were so many great tools, like the pneumatic whizzer, the air lifting jacking bags and everything like that, tranquilizer. Yeah, that was. But the tool went to work a lot, so it was a very gratifying feeling to rescue people in car accidents.
Third, if you could describe the housing police in one word, what would it be and why?
It, for me, was the most memorable and favoritist place, and it was my foundation of my work ethic. You know, it just the guys that took me and showed me the ins and outs and the works of the job. None other like it. I can only say that because I never experienced transit in the NYPD at that time. So of course, my prejudice is gonna be housing. I've always felt that way, and to this time, I still do. I loved it. It was a great experience.
Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City?
So I have two bars, Coogan's, which doesn't exist anymore. What a great place, Upper Manhattan. But my local watering hole in Staten Island was Duffy's on Forest Avenue. What a great place. Cops, EMS, they're a great bunch of guys. Restaurants, Carmine's. I like the one in the 90s up on Broadway better than the one in Times Square, but Carmine's, outside of my wife's great Italian cooking, that's a great place to eat Italian food.
Fifth and finally, knowing what you know now, if you can go back in time and give advice to a younger version of yourself, what would you tell young John Latanzio?
The younger version of myself is my son. He's already got 5 years on the job, so I tell him a lot. I give him as much advice and stuff as I can, but don't get discouraged. Always, Michael Curtin, know your job, do your job. Like, just do it. But don't be a miserable miser on the job. Just,
of course,
yeah. Do it.
This has been a load of fun. Don't sign off yet. We'll say goodbye off the air. Before we sign off, any shout outs you want to give to anyone or anything?
So all my ESU, whether they were transit, housing, and now currently the retired and the new guys out there, just keep carrying the torch. You guys are the best of the best. And my favorite little story, not a story, but the saying is, God created ESU so even firemen can have heroes.
And I love that, because that's the counterpoint to firemen saying that ESU cops are the cops that want to be firemen. There you go. So there's the own little counterpoint. I like that one. My shout out is to you. Thank you very much for coming on. I'm glad we can have this conversation. I'll definitely bring you back sometime. And of course, to the chat, Ruth Ann Griffin, Raquel Pranzo, and Peter Pranzo, Michael Ferlazzo, your sister Jackie Latanzio, your old partner Mark Musarella, as well as Robert Erickson. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Coming up next on the Mike New Haven podcast, of course, we dig into the history of terrorism in New York City with Joe Connor. He's an author and terrorism expert, so that should be a fascinating episode, I should say. He wrote Shattered Lives about his father, who unfortunately died in the Francis Tavern bombing of 1975. So that should be a very insightful episode. In the meantime, I do want to say this episode goes out to the memories of Matthew Dziergowski, Jerry Dominguez, Wally Weaver, and Betty Danz. On behalf of John Latanzio, this has been Volume 11 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. We will see you next time. And as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby. Have a great weekend.
Anytime, baby.